Alex Ansary here, December 5th, 2015. And in this video, I'm going to provide some basic advice for preparing for a shit hit the fan situation, specifically in the city of Portland. And the reason I'm doing this video is because I have since moved on from Portland because I don't want to remain in that city where I believe a number of things are set to happen. A ground zero, if you will, for future events. Now, this isn't that video to list those events, but things like a widespread power outage, or things like a foreign army invasion, if, say, our country was invaded and they were pouring into West Coast cities. Portland obviously could be one of those cities, along with Seattle, San Francisco, British Columbia, Los Angeles. Portland's also a city where they have hosted anti-terror drills like Top Off 4, which are really practice drills for martial law, a quarantine of a city, locking it down, shutting it down, and the government for years has been practicing that very scenario. Portland in 2007 played host to Top Off 4, and so it's already been a place where they've hosted their zombie apocalypse drill, if you will, how to contain a potentially toxic population that's been infected with either a bioattack weapon or nuclear weapon or some other event. In nuclear warfare, some sort of a situation like that where the cities are targeted, probably not a place that you want to be. And on the soft kill level, things like Fukushima and other forms of radiation and pollution might cause somebody to rethink residing in Portland. But right now the city is, and I've talked in depth in other videos about the society in Portland, there are only so many people that are aware of some of these greater threats. And it, for the most part, has a lot of people in Portland that are there to pretty much enjoy their lives, have a good time. There's a lot of new Portland residents. And so I'm going to provide just some basic information and advice relating to preparing for a situation where you gotta bug out. Staying in Portland long term in your house with your survival goods, dealing with the flood, dealing with potential looters, dealing with potential diseases and potential electromagnetic weapons that could be used against the residents of the city. Yeah, I don't recommend staying in Portland for long, defending your house. Hashtag escape from Portland, save yourself. Make some money off that house while you can. I'm not recommending remaining in Portland. But the cornerstone of bugging out is a bug out bag, and obviously in a wet climate like Portland, in a flood situation, a dive bag is incredibly important. I've also had a lot of friends that have had dreams about flooding, also a lot of concerns about pole shifts, how Portland would be affected floating off into the sea. Even in the book, I think Ecotopia, there's a reference to part of Oregon and the Oregon coast floating off into the ocean. So I just want to throw that out there, that this has always been something that friends of mine in Oregon and Portland, by the way, where I'm from and where I was born, but I moved out of recently. I know a number of people that have talked about the flooding dreams. And so for years in Portland, while doing Outside the Box TV, which was an Access TV show that I hosted, not only did I cover current events, there were a number of shows I did on survival preparedness, specifically tailored around the things you might have in your bag, and edible plants, and starting a fire, and creating a lean-to shelter based on wilderness survival strategies in the Pacific Northwest outside of Portland. Of course, it's good to have basic urban survival skills. I'm advocating a bug-out situation, and I'm focusing on that in this particular talk. And part of dealing with such a situation where potentially there's a widespread flood, it's just getting bigger right now. Right now it's in pockets and there's certain areas affected. There's going to be a lot more flooded areas in the next couple of days. Already you're seeing pictures of people with kayaks and canoes, like that picture out of the Walmart parking lot at McMinnville. Having a boat or an inflatable raft or a kayak or a canoe, these are all really valuable things to have if you're a resident of the Pacific Northwest or Portland. You can look on Craigslist, and sometimes boats are given away for free. So, you can look at what's happening now with the micro flood. Things could really get far worse, and I believe that they will. And I believe that we are going to continue to see crustal displacement. There's ring of fire issues. The next, by the way, major earthquake in Portland would separate East versus West Portland. So there'd be a water access issue for at least one side of Portland, especially if you have a grid down situation and there's no power. I've seen Portland's infrastructure show signs of real weakening in the last few years, from, just winds knocking trees, power out, for days on end in certain areas. And that's not even like a major catastrophe. So I think the infrastructure in general, the grid, is weak as it is. You add in earth changes or natural events and or solar flares, things of that nature, large ones, which could come later. And you have a vulnerable population if you don't have food coming in and out. Now, I don't want to focus on what could happen in Portland in a worst case scenario, but when you're dealing with starving humans, it's not a pretty picture. And I also believe there's a lot of really unconscious residents within Portland that are nihilists, that are selfish, that would do violent things to others to get their stuff. So I'm advocating bug the fuck out and get away from Portlanders. Get out of there. And you're going to have to understand or strategize where you're going to go on your own. But I would recommend going to Google as I'm speaking to you now. Type in Portland, Oregon, Google Maps. Also look at the satellite view. A couple places I want you to think about if you're heading west. If you're in the middle of East Portland, okay, you want to think about jumping spots, getting from point A to point B without getting robbed. And without getting stuck in a checkpoint, maybe some situation, maybe they're saying it's a pandemic and no one can leave the city. You need to be able to know how to get out of the city by foot without having an issue with military, police, thugs, gangs, or other. Okay, so you have Powell Butte, which is a place that a person could disappear to a certain extent short term. This is within the city. And further out, heading out Powell and Division, places like that, you'll end up in Gresham, which is a dense population. Going through the middle of Gresham isn't something that I recommend. But to the north, you have Marine Drive, and that heads out quite a ways. What I've always thought has been the most preferred way to get out by foot is the Springwater Corridor Trail. And the trail continues past the concrete part to where if you have a machete in your dive bag, we'll talk about stuff you might want to put in your dive bag in just a minute. But a machete would be a really essential tool, something that's maybe strapped to your dive bag as you cut through the brush. So I would recommend heading southeast. And there's actually a destination in Central Oregon that I also would recommend for off the grid, and that's Christmas Valley. And there are building codes and certain land use codes there, but enforcement, from what I've been told by a current resident, enforcement isn't heavy-handed. It's nothing like Costilla County in Colorado. And so I've been keeping my eye on Christmas Valley in Central Oregon for some time. And while I have since left Oregon, that's not something for me. But for those of you that are watching this channel that are in Oregon, you may want to look at that as a destination and that as a place to potentially get land now and develop some sort of off-the-grid thing. So knowing your way out on foot and knowing that map is really important. Where the parks are, where the higher elevation is in a flooding situation where you're having clogged roads, and you're seeing a lot of this in and around downtown Portland and the high-end real estate area around the Pearl District. And that's not necessarily a cheap place to live. And so the further east you get, the higher up in elevation it gets. Now on the west side, you're dealing with a really dense population all through the west heading south. And there's a sprawl that's spreading south past Wilsonville and Canby. I wouldn't recommend that direction. But Savi's Island, there's a couple other places that I want to recommend. There's also some places if you can get beyond Vancouver, Washington, and get east, the the East Gorge area of Washington. I'm trying to remember what road that's on. But you see how having a boat or a raft or something is a major asset in a major flood situation like right now. Now imagine a situation if it keeps raining and raining and raining and raining. Having a boat would be incredibly valuable and something that you would probably need to defend from people that would rob you of the boat. People that might be screaming for you to help them, and 5, 6 people. So in the dive bag, a way to protect yourself, essential. If you can't obtain a firearm, some other self-defense item that you know how to use, not to mention a knife. As far as items, maps, plastic bags, waterproof items, of course proper clothing, thermal underwear, some sort of a poncho, way to deal with heavy rain, waterproof shoes, gloves, things of that nature. Tent, sleeping bag, compass, grapefruit seed extract for water, several forms, several ways you can disinfect water, maybe a little thing of bleach, tablets, traditional water filter, maybe a sterno pen. Just like having several ways to start a fire, maybe have several ways to filter water. And so there's a lot of information you can already look at on a 72-hour pack. Also maybe having some emergency water containers, something to cook with, something to, some sort of food, maybe a combination MRE, combination something else. Nuts are also very important. Things that are small, compact, but good for energy. There's also something called chia seeds, which the Aztecs used when they went on their missions. That doesn't really weigh a whole lot. You mix that with water, it's something that can sustain you if you're going for a prolonged period of time without food, but you need to keep moving. Matthew Stein, author of When Tech Fails, also recommended that you put some sort of bandaging that you might put around blisters in your feet. For walking long periods of time, you're going to have blisters. And so being prepared for that type of a situation, really, really key. And so think about those things that you might put in your dive bag. And food, if you are already camping and visiting some of these areas, and I forgot to mention Forest Park, if you're in the downtown Portland area or northwest area, and you need to get to higher elevation right away, Forest Park is the destination. But again, some of these areas within the city, you're going to be bumping into other people. And you're also going to be dealing with a lot of people heading east at the same time if it's a really severe catastrophe or event. It could be nuclear fallout. It could be a grid down situation. It could be people escaping government orders to stay in the city because they're being quarantined because of some sort of dirty bomb. Remember, that was the Top Off 4 exercise in 2007. That I covered and also put on YouTube, highlighting Homeland Security using Portland as a city to do their own test. How they would shut down the city, how they would keep people contained within Portland. So in Portland, if you look at the freeways and road systems, and I suggest you do, there's only so many ways in or out. So you need to prepare for a situation where you have to get out by foot because you can't get out by car for whatever reason. Either your car won't work, or because of some sort of flooding, or maybe a military checkpoint. So knowing where you're going to go by foot and scouting out locations, and in some cases having your stuff buried in a cache at the destination that you're going. So, maybe you can hide a cache if you know you're going to go through Powell Butte, or you know you're going to go through XYZ Park, or over here, and maybe practice hiding things that may not be very expensive or valuable. On a monetary level right now, in a grid down situation, if the shit did hit the fan, if you really did need that cache of MREs, food, silver, guns, ammo, other things, other essentials, then it can be there, buried. I also want to recommend documenting on camera where you can. If you have a solar power generator, like a small one, if you have, like a cell phone or some other internet hotspot device, if you have a camera that doesn't use a whole lot of power, you can reach the world from a mountaintop and report down, just because one area might be flooded, if we're just talking about a flood. The grid's not out. The satellites are still functioning. Now, there may be some cases where the satellites are not functioning. You would still want to record what's taking place. So someone could document on video. Like, for example, I'm using a camera right now, a Canon. This Canon, with enough batteries, can go and go and go and go. And with enough memory cards, 32 gig, for example, it's hours of footage. So if you are able to charge your camera or have backup batteries, you can document something that will be making history. I mean, there's no guarantee the grid's just going to stay down if it's a grid down situation or World War III. That footage that you shoot with your camera, whatever it may be it looting or whatever, that may be really valuable footage for the historical record of what happened there. And I think Portland's going to see looting, you're going to see gangs, you're going to see people acting gang-like. There's already a tribalistic element to Portland. If you've ever seen the movie Children of Men, where the guy gets set up and he's driving through the forest and all of a sudden he's attacked by what seems to be a group of human apes that have been out in the woods too long. They're going after him and his car for a very specific reason. It's a very scary situation. It's a futuristic scene. Oftentimes I see things like that in my mind's eye happening in Portland and just east of Portland, where you have people that aren't fully prepared, so they're basically starving. And in some areas you have gangs and pockets of former vegans turned cannibals, although it's not funny. It's not funny at all. But people that never took the warning seriously, to have enough food on storage, to be able to survive, to know where to go. I don't think remaining in Portland in a dense population center is a good idea in general, with all the things that we now have going on in the world. I think it's a liability all the way. I think this whole idea of defending your turf in Portland and your property is a short-term proposition only. Down the line, whether it be a grid down situation or a military invasion or a long-term flooding, you don't want to be remaining in an environment with contaminants. And they're already warning people now about the water that's in the streets of Portland. Not to mention the fecal matter in Portland, in the water, floating. Now this is serious. And what I alluded to in another video is the sewer program isn't functioning like it should. There's a lot of money that was put into the sewer program, and it's had problems that the city has admitted. They've been trying to fix their problems, allegedly. And because they haven't, you're now seeing what happens when you have as much rain as we've seen recently in Portland. But I also must say that a friend out there by the name of Danny Santos, who is in his own way warning Portlanders, his friends and family, about things to come, the signs, if you will, the writing on the wall. He thinks the water is coming upward, either caused by geoengineering or something else. He made a reference to the Bible. Whether this is an act of God, by the way, or an act of man, is also up for debate. But whatever the cause is of this flood, one thing is certain. You need to know how to survive a shit hit the fan situation in Portland and what you could be facing. In addition, Portland has a human trafficking problem. And so females need to get out of Dodge, need to have good men around them. I could see criminals taking advantage of a bad situation in the future in Portland. Specifically Portland and cities like that where there's a lot of women without protectors that have been given a false sense of security. I also think a lot of people have been duped into moving to Portland under the false guise that it's a safer, progressive city, better place to, raise your kids. City's got a lot of issues. People are in a lot of denial about that. If you look at my Real Portlandia series that I recently uploaded on my channel, you'll get an idea of where I'm coming from with my criticisms as to society in Portland, being someone that was born in Portland and spent most of my life in Portland, and 10 years of my life on television in Portland, hosting Outside the Box TV. Now I'm coming to you from New Mexico. I strategically relocated to this area as well as southern Colorado, where I've spent some time, because I feel that there are some dark days coming to the West Coast, the East Coast, to the world in general. And I'm not saying that you can run and hide from some of these things, only that I see problems with being in one of the most popular sought out cities to live in America. It already has issues with homelessness, with sex trafficking. Many of the residents are already suffering from issues like alcoholism. It's oversaturated, it's overpopulated, it's too dense. And it really seems to represent some sort of Tower of Babel to me in a microcosm way, if that makes sense to you. That it's like, all these people are being told Portland's the place to be, but it's so vulnerable. The people are so vulnerable. It almost seems like a trap. So I advise that people have a plan of action based on where you live now, taking the advice that I've given you, understanding what your short-term plan would be to get out of the city, preferably with the least amount of interaction with others, criminal elements, police, military, other. It could be a pandemic, grid down situation, military invasion. You might want to have a number of things to document what's taking place in your dive bag, having the basic things that, one might want to have in their grab-and-go bag, extra emphasis on fold-up solar panels and electronics, from cell phones to iPads to other devices to cameras to maybe GPS, and again, have maps. Know where you're going. If you're coming from the east part in the middle to Powell Butte, to jump your way around Gresham or through Gresham to get out of there. On the other side, you have the Mount Hood Wilderness. You have the Pacific Crest Trail. You have Washington to the north. If you have a boat or some other flotation device, you might be able to get across to the state of Washington. And then from there, just keep going. Away from Seattle, away from the west, if you're in Washington, going north and going slightly east to the center of Washington, north to the Canadian border. If you're coming down from the other side of Portland, leaving 122nd Foster area, you want to get places like Christmas Valley in the center of the state. I recommend going camping. Part of being prepared for a shit hit the fan situation is doing drills, where you and your loved ones, a pack for everybody, you go out and don't be dependent on the cell phone to work, however. I mean, I'm merely placing emphasis on that for, a backup and for documenting and taking pictures. I'm not necessarily saying your cell phone's going to work, and I think there's way too much dependence on GPS technology. So know where you're going. Practice camping at some of those sites. Practice remaining at some of those sites for several days. Practice cooking with things. Put things in caches in areas where you camp on a regular basis. Have a means to protect yourself, if not a firearm. Something else, if you have the means to learn martial arts. And especially women living in Portland, they should be learning self-defense if they're in a situation if they don't have a male protector, but males may be coming after them to take them away for some reason. Women should know how to defend themselves more than firing a gun and firing pepper mace. They should know how to use a knife. They should know where to stab. They should know how to improvise certain weapons. And there's also a technology about improvising ammunition and projectile weapons. And there's always a benefit, by the way, in a crossbow, which is silent but can also be deadly. And so, in light of this historic flooding in Portland, those are some of my basic tips for a shit hit the fan situation. Get out of the city with your dive bag, potentially with a flotation device, with a plan of action to get to your spot that's within reach from your current residence that you plan to get there by foot. Plan to get to your spot from Portland by foot if you have to. Thanks for watching.